everybody. All right, well, before I get into the details of my presentation, it's important that everybody understand that unlike most of the projects in this class, mine was not a proposal, but rather implementing the initial stages of a research project, examining how the experience of combat impacts the religious perspectives of individual veterans. So, for that reason, this presentation is not going to be a pitch, but rather a discussion of the development of the project up to the point where it is now. So, I got the idea for this research project from my recent time spent studying abroad in the Middle East. Living in a region that's surrounded by armed conflicts where everybody thinks that the enemy has a religious motive, yet nobody claims, who's supportive of any particular cause, claims religion as a major motive for that support, got me thinking about how does religion actually impact warfare, which led to how does warfare impact religion? And I decided to look at that on an individual level. Having come to this research question, I approached Professor Ira Chernus in the Religious Studies Department. Ira Chernus is one of the leading academics in the study of how religious ideology as well as national mythology help bring societies into war, both in terms of propaganda and in terms of habits of thought. And while he had never done any research similar to, that is to say, looking at this on an individual level, was nonetheless very supportive of my idea. And so I then began actual research under his supervision. As I began researching my topic, something that I immediately found was that there was very little academic work regarding the issue of combat experience and individual religious perspective at all. Those few studies that I found included, examined it from the perspective of how might religion create a motive for combat, or looking at various religious coping mechanisms for dealing with the stress of combat, but nothing related to the process of change within the individual. I did, however, find a large body of literature that included soldiers' personal accounts of their combat experience. And these often included bits of information about religious perspective or how that played into the person's experience, but of course was never the focus. However, from these accounts, it became clear that combat was in fact a significant spiritual event for many people. Examples of this included accounts of prayers helping people to overcome fear in combat, of a U.S. Army chaplain who baptized 200 soldiers during one sermon in Operation Desert Shield, or testaments by Vietnam veterans who felt abandoned by God. But again, there had been no study of this. And so I determined that the best way to continue with my research was to actually ask veterans about their process. I decided that I was particularly interested in examining how this process might be different in different national and military contexts. So I decided, building off my previous experience in the Middle East, to interview 15 to 20 US veterans and 15 to 20 Israeli veterans. In order to conduct the Israel-based portion of my research, I applied for a Europe grant, and this process forced me to decide exactly what sorts of questions I was going to ask people. In order to develop these, I contacted a Vietnam combat veteran, who's a friend of mine, as well as Hanan Neighbor, who is an IDF veteran and the head of the Hillel group for Jewish life here at CU Boulder. And with their input, I came up with a list of questions that examined the context in which the person served, that is to say, what conflicts they were in and their job in the military. Their understanding of God and divinity, both before and after combat, as well as their moral understanding. And the civilian and military support structures that were in place that may have impacted this process for them. After applying for the grant, I then had to apply for IRB permission to conduct this human research. This process then forced me to outline exactly what I was going to do at every stage of my research, all the way from writing the recruiting emails to how I was going to store / dispose of the information from the interviews that I would conduct. And one of the significant things that came out of this process was the understanding for the necessity of maintaining the privacy of the people that I would interview, such that they will be kept completely anonymous, and to the point that they will be giving oral permission to participate rather than written. And also that it was important not to ask questions that delved too much into the details of a person's combat experience or military activities. This is being both sensitive to the individual's experience, but also avoiding issues that might fall into classified material. Having applied for this, I then had to contact the Israeli embassy in order to find out what legal parameters Israel had for conducting such research. And although it took them a month and a half to get back to me, I was notified that US permission was fine for Israel, which was great, because then I had a lot less work to do. Within 2 weeks of receiving that information, I was notified that I had both received my grant and gotten IRB permission for the project. As a result of this, at this point, I had purchased my plane ticket to Tel Aviv. I'll be leaving on the 29th of December and spending 8 days in country. I have conducted my first interview with a US veteran. I'm in the process of transcribing that interview, and have also been contacting people both in the United States and in Israel, looking for potential subjects for my research. And that's where the project's at now. Are there any questions?
Yay!
Yay.
Good job.
Thanks.